I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher. And it burns, burns, burns.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Afterburners podcast. I am your host, Sam Niedermeyer. With me, as always, is Mr. Bobby Koch, and we are in frigid New York, Bobby. How are you? You see you're all bundled up right now, man. It's been kind of chilly out these last couple of hours, haven't they?
Yeah, it's been cold today. Not as cold as in Canada, I imagine. I guess Mike's not here because he froze to death, or I don't know what's going on with him.
No Mike today, which proves the point that we think he's a little under the weather. Fortunately, he wasn't able to make it. He's feeling a little under the weather, so he must be frozen. Also, this proves the point that him and I are not an item. We do not get sick and together. We're not making out or any stuff like that.
Either that or you just built up immunity.
Well, I mean, there's always that possibility. Hey, by the way, speaking of frigid weather, it snowed this weekend on Saturday.
It did.
And I got some, obviously some fun pictures with your dog in the snow, but they had SantaCon in the city.
Yeah, I purposely left the city.
I realize that now. So I live in Brooklyn, which is not anywhere near like Central Park where everyone congregates. But I imagine you get quite the crowd around here in your neighborhood, huh?
Yeah, so without giving away too much information, and it's not that I distrust any of our listeners, it's that I once had a particular issue with someone online trying to stalk me. Not making that up. It's an actual thing that happened.
Very true. I was there for it. And it was not of the female folk, no.
Anyway, SantaCon, the epicenter is right in my neighborhood. For those who are unfamiliar, the basis of SantaCon is that people dress up, usually as Santa, but sometimes just as anything Christmas related, and do pub crawls and get really drunk. And just basically, it's one of the few times that New York City allows public drunkenness without really arresting anybody. And being right in the middle of it, especially when you're just trying to walk your dog every year, gets really annoying very fast. So I went to the suburbs where my parents live.
The burbs.
And we hung out with their dogs, and we had a grand old time playing in the yard with the different dogs during the snow day instead of being in the city with a bunch of drunk Santa wannabes.
I remember last year I was in the city for SantaCon, and it was just it's not even fun. Now, granted, we're sitting here drinking some beers. I got Heineken, you got Shinerbach. Hopefully we're still getting the way for those free packages, boys, but we haven't gotten them yet. And it's just it's not even fun to be around. It's just annoying people. Just a bunch of annoying people that are drunk. I stayed in Brooklyn way away from everyone, and I imagine everyone in Brooklyn was like, I'm staying the fuck away from Manhattan today.
Yeah, this isn't even me calling you old. This is just me saying it's a different type of crowd. What I mean by that is it's all yuppies for the most part. The part of the reason that it's my neighborhood is it's targeted at the kind of people who live in my neighborhood. I don't fit in here really. But it's yuppies and it's college students and it's people who just want to get blackout drunk and not
by 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, it's not a good time. It's really sloppy. It kind of reminds me of back at Ithaca. There's a game of the year called Cortica. We're D3, so most of you probably don't know about it, but it is televised.
Cool if it was a cornucopia, where it'd be kind of bringing in the Hunger Games there, huh?
Yeah, it is televised though on ESPN 2 or 3 or maybe the Ocho.
Ooh, good reference, dodgeball there.
Yeah, and during Cortica, people just start drinking at 6 a.m. and be really sloppy, throwing up in the elevators, and just generally being disgusting human beings. So SantaCon's the adult version of that. Not even adult, because anyone who takes part in SantaCon, maybe this is an early burn this week, but if you take part in SantaCon, I 100% judge you for taking part in SantaCon. I think a little bit less of anyone I see post Instagram pictures. Anytime I see one of my friends post that they were involved in SantaCon, I go, oof, I like you a little bit less now.
I've given away 0 likes for every SantaCon picture I've ever seen. Maybe 6 years ago I did, but it's just gotten so brutal. But I tell you what, though, we had some fantasy quarterfinals, semifinals this past couple of weeks. Quarterfinals were the most.
Quarterfinals were the past week. Semifinals, in at least in most leagues.
Some leagues, yeah, but most of them were quarterfinals. Teams advance. Do a good job.
Yeah, I made semifinals in 3 of my 4 dynasty leagues, which is the best I've ever done. Although, to be fair, this is my first year playing in 4, and until this year, it's kind of funny because everyone calls you dynasty expert or dynasty analyst. I've made the playoffs once in my dynasty career.
Hmm.
I lost 98 to 96. So sometimes the process doesn't always work out. You can overthink things, but
Trust the process, man.
I'm glad to be where I am, especially in one league in particular. I was in last place last year, so to make the semifinals this quickly after finishing last year really shows that my rebuild efforts paid off very quickly. So very excited for that team. Hopefully they win. I'm a little nervous. I'm facing DeAndre Hopkins in 2 leagues, but he does have TJ Yates throwing him the ball, so hopefully that helps me a bit. But yeah, we got some good stuff to talk about today.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So before you get into it, we have a great show, a little preview. As we're going to talk a little bit of, terrible to see what happened to Carson Wentz. So we got the Nick Foles stuff we're going to talk about. We're also going to see Aaron Rodgers might be back. How does that affect his number one target, Jordy Nelson? We got some stashes to look forward to in 2018, and we took a fan question off of Twitter. Before we get started, Bobby, where can the good people find you on Twitter and DL Football?
So you can find me at Wrecked Fantasy. That's REKED Fantasy. Just a quick announcement. If I win any of my leagues, I'm not changing my Twitter name, but I thought our listeners would appreciate this. I'm changing my team name to Shipwrecked because I wrecked the ship. So there you go. There's our pun of the day. Sam's just kind of staring at me right now. And
it's actually rather clever.
And you can find me.
I wasn't going to give you a laugh, though.
And you can find me at dynastyleaguefootball.com. You can find my articles there, as well as I have an author profile there. And yeah, co-hosting this pod along with my good buddy Sam. And where can they find you, Sam?
Yeah, at the needy one, guys, is at Afterburners Pod. And as always, well, as usual, except he's sick, under the weather, making out with some other dude, at Mike Jarvis. Mike, get better soon, buddy. Let's get right into it. I mentioned that we had the Carson Wentz injury. And that's obviously a big blow to the Eagles, kind of, at least in the regular season. We think it might not be, but definitely the postseason. Nick Foles stepping in, Bobby. How is this going to affect? I mean, let me rephrase that. Nick Foles isn't like the worst choice if you push into a corner and you're starting him for the Eagles, right? Like you could do worse.
I can't recall, but in 2014, didn't he set either like a completion record or second in completion percentage or something like that?
He had something really high. I think it was completion percentage.
It might have been. I can't remember. Like passes about an interception, something along those lines. Anyway, I looked up some stats, particularly for this week. So Nick Foles is facing the Giants, aka my favorite team, and also probably one of the worst teams in the league. They probably would be the worst team in the league if it weren't for the Browns. But some interesting fantasy relevant stuff. For those of you who are questioning whether you should start Nick Foles, especially if you're desperate. So the Giants are 31st in passing yards allowed. They're 30th in passing touchdowns and 32nd, meaning dead last in fantasy points per games to quarterbacks. So the Giants rank towards the bottom or almost exactly the bottom in every statistical category for fantasy points towards quarterbacks. So if you're really desperate, Nick Foles doesn't necessarily make the worst play as some people on Twitter might have you thinking.
Yeah, and the funny thing too is if you're looking for, even if he was like somebody, let's say you had Carson Wentz in your team, and for insurance you had Nick Foles, right? That happened. I had a thing on my dynasty, but unfortunately I'm like way out of it. You got the Giants, but then you got the Raiders the week after that too. So there's actually two very good defenses that you're actually thinking about. Okay, like you could do a lot worse if you're the quarterback heading into these semifinals and finals.
Yeah, and you also have to remember that around the league, there aren't that many good quarterbacks this year. A lot of quarterbacks have gone down where, for example, the Texans are starting TJ Yates until recently, and I know we're talking about this soon, but the Packers were starting Brett Hundley. The Colts are starting Jacoby Brissett. And don't get me wrong, Brissett's okay, but he's not Andrew Luck. So around the league, there's been a lot of backup quarterbacks starting. So if you're starting Nick Foles, your opponent isn't necessarily starting an elite caliber quarterback. They might be, but they're not necessarily doing it.
Yeah, it took him to the playoffs in 2013 with the Eagles. He went 8-2, 64% completion percentage. This is what it is: 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. For his career, 56 touchdowns, 27 picks. Now, granted, you have to go there with a grain of salt because in 2015, he was playing under the quarterback guru, Mr. Jeff Fisher. And with that year, he went 56% complete. We don't think we have to tell our audience the worst year he had statistically. But still, he went 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. And if you're playing for Jeff Fisher and you go 7 touchdowns, 10 receptions with a 56% completion percentage, I mean, you might as well just line up your credentials for the Hall of Fame.
I can't remember who tweeted this, but it's very, very interesting that the Vikings, led by Case Keenum, who played under Jeff Fisher, the Rams, led by Jared Goff, who played under Jeff Fisher, and now the Eagles, who are now being led by Nick Foles, who played under Jeff Fisher, are all going to the playoffs, and the common theme is no more Jeff Fisher.
No more Jeff Fisher. I mean, it's like it's not necessarily complete math or science here. It's, hey, get rid of this guy, never have him again. What are we thinking for Foles? Is there any chance he throws for 250, couple scores this week?
Against the Giants, anything's possible.
That's true.
The Giants' defense is really, really bad, guys. And our cornerbacks either keep getting suspended or just being so whiny that they get on the bench. And that's talking about I think it was second-round pick, maybe his first-round pick even, Eli Apple. Eli Apple hasn't been active for 4 or 5 games because he's just been so bad in the locker room, apparently, and just complaining so much that he's been benched. And it really seems like his career, at least with the Giants, may be turning towards getting released or ending up elsewhere soon.
Probably complaining that Ben McAdoo is such a terrible coach.
But even with McAdoo gone, he's still complaining, supposedly.
Yeah, true. Another guy that's kind of factored in with terms of injury. Number 1, Aaron Rodgers is returning, but number 2, Jordy Nelson kind of come off the horizon. Is it kind of maybe worth a shot all those weeks if you held on to Jordy Nelson, you're starting the semifinal games? Does he make for a good play?
I think it depends who else you have. I know a bunch of people who are going to say, I'm starting Jordy right now. The thing is, and I know you could argue it was just Hundley, but Jordy has been so awful without Rodgers that I really have a hard time trusting him in a matchup where if you're still concerned about whether you should start him, this matchup matters because you have a chance at winning. And so if you have any other trustable options, I probably would start them. The other thing is they're playing the Carolina defense, at least this week.
Yeah,
which
not the Giants, that's for sure. Which
is not as tough as it's been in the past, but it's still not the easiest defense to score against. So I think, and now that I say this, Jordy will have like 3 touchdowns and 300 yards. But if I had any other options that I even trusted somewhat, I'd probably have to make a decision. And I would lean towards staying away from Jordy if I could. It might not be the right call, but that's what my gut tells me.
I mean, it's not like he's not getting the ball. He's getting chances. It's just like the routes aren't going for like these like 20-yard slants or like 30-yard posts that like him and Rodgers are so used to doing. He's basically got, 12 receptions over the last 3 games. And I know that's not typical Jordy Nelson numbers. Actually, that could be like a normal 3-game stretch for him. The problem is it wouldn't be like 50 yards or 60 yards, what it is right now. It would be like 260 yards,
The other thing is, and I think people are kind of discounting this, Aaron Rodgers has been out for weeks now, and you have no idea how he's going to come out and play. I hope he plays well because I love watching Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers being good is good for the league. But he is coming off an injury that many thought was going to be season-ending. It's not. He's coming back now, and they still have a chance at the playoffs.
Was it his throwing arm collarbone?
I don't quite know, actually.
I'll look it up.
But regardless, it's somebody coming off an injury who hasn't practiced for weeks, probably, because he hasn't been able to. So I have a hard time saying I would trust his receivers. If I trusted anyone on that team in terms of receiving, it would be Davante Adams. Because even without Rodgers, Davante Adams was still performing very well, at least fantasy-wise. So I think, as I said earlier, if you can stay away from Jordy, I would. I'm sure I'm going to hear it from someone who told me, or I'm sure I'm going to hear it from someone after this week that I told them to stay away from Jordy, and he went off for X number of points. But that's one of those things that I mentioned before. The process. My process tells me stay away from Jordy.
Here's the thing. If you're in – so, number 1, Aaron Rodgers, it was the throwing shoulder, so it was the right collarbone. So, just something to think about. Maybe when you get back into form, It's not the left shoulder like it was, 3-4 years ago when he had the injury, and he looked great as soon as he came back. But one thing to think about, if you were in the semifinals of your league and you've made it with Jordy Nelson riding the bench, do you really need him for this game? I mean, like, Grant, we had this conversation last week with Mike where we talked about, like, hey, like, if you're close, do you go for the extra? Like, you could check out to see what the other team is supposed to put up in the lineup. But if you've been this far without Jordy and you got on a nice run, I'm with you. I don't think you take the chance.
It all depends. If you're telling me that it's either Jordy or some other guy that I trust even less than Jordy, that makes it easy. If you're saying, okay, and I think tell me if I'm wrong, the Packers play on Sunday, right? Some games are happening on Thursday and Saturday.
Yeah.
The Packers play on. So let's say you're down.
The Panthers.
Let's say you're down significantly on Sunday, and Jordy has much more upside than whatever safe option you decide is safer than him. I totally get why you would play Jordy then over the safe option, because Jordy has that ability to have that huge game that could put you over the top. But all things considered equal, I'd probably go for someone I consider a little bit safer at the moment.
You know what I didn't like? Right around on the injury, people were complaining. I think I don't know if this was a combination of just Vikings fans or if it was just people that think the game needs to be played a certain way, talking about like, oh man, not a penalty, or maybe like, I forget I can't remember if the guy had gotten injured. Had gotten a flag or gotten a penalty when he hit Rodgers. And I think the idea was that, like, look, he should have gotten a penalty. He should have got suspended because is the game better, like, without Aaron Rodgers in it? You know what I mean? Like, you made a point earlier, and I just got sidetracked there. Like normal, like I normally do. I just thought I wanted to stay right on base there. But it's good to see him back, and hopefully he looks good. And
I'm pretty sure there was a flag on the play. I don't think he got suspended, and I think some Packers fans were calling for a suspension, but it was deemed not really a dirty hit, just an unfortunate hit. And look, that's how I feel in general. Good quarterbacks make the game more watchable. As fantasy players, we're all watching teams that we don't actually have a vested interest in besides our own fantasy interests. And so we want to see good play. The NFL is a better product when guys like Aaron Rodgers are playing or Andrew Luck are playing, or this year when Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz are playing. So when they go down with injuries, it sucks because it means we're watching more games with backup quarterbacks or even backup to backup quarterbacks. And what we've seen from around the league this year is there aren't even 32 good quarterbacks. So when you're going to backups, you're going to be watching a lot of bad football, and nobody likes that.
Yeah, definitely 100%. Especially with the way the game is set up now, where it's kind of heavy towards offense. If you get a shitty QB, then it's like, oh, damn it, we're in for a terrible game. So one of the things we're going to go over is, just to keep this fresh so that it kind of has everyone involved, because chances are, people that are listening are not in the semifinals games.
If you listen, so what Sam is saying is if you listen to us, you didn't make your playoffs.
I don't want to put it like that, but just in case you do listen to us, your team's probably shitty. Let's be real.
We are named after literal shit, so I guess our advice must be too.
Well, we know our audience very well. But you tell me about this. You wrote an article recently on DL Football, and it's kind of talking about some of the best stashes for next year.
Yeah. What I like to do each season, and it's an interesting experiment to do, is for the next coming season, I like to take a look on spotrac.com. If you guys aren't familiar, I think it's SpotRac, pretty sure. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. I know it's spelled that way. But you can see all kinds of sports contracts
on there. If you're pronouncing it wrong, let's hope you're pronouncing it wrong.
You can see all kinds of contracts on there. And so what I do is I look at the free agent class for the coming season, and you can break it down by position. You can break it down by UFAs versus RFAs versus all the different kinds of restricted statuses there are. But the reason I do that for Dynasty is, so let's say, for example, in the article, one that I mentioned is Jarvis Landry. It seems like he's all but gone from the Dolphins because they've made no attempts at giving him an extension. The offseason, they mentioned they didn't really want them there anymore. Maybe his play recently has changed that. But I'm not looking at where Jarvis Landry is going. Instead, I'm saying, okay, who on the current roster of Dolphins would get an increased opportunity if Jarvis Landry were to leave? And there's a guy there named Leonte Carew. I know my friend Zach Reed, I think his handle is at Tacit Assassin. There might be a number 13 in there if I recall. It might be Tacit Assassin 13.
Yeah, at Tacit Assassin 13.
Wow, I am better at remembering handles than I thought I was. Anyway,
Good job.
Stalker. Anyway, Carew was a highly thought of player out of Rutgers and hasn't done much to date, but he profiles almost exactly the same as Landry. And as we've known, the slot position in Miami has been very lucrative to 0.5 PPR leagues, as it has been for Landry. So he probably costs you nothing to add, and he's the type of guy that I'm looking at adding. Another guy I mentioned, I'm not going to go through everyone.
Yeah, give us like, what do you say? 3 guys. Give us 3 guys.
Well, I did.
Five.
I did some for per position, so I'll do 2 for each position.
All right.
Except quarterback, because there's just nothing there.
I hope you don't mind if I sit this one out because I didn't prepare at all. I wanted to hear your interest, and then maybe we'll fight later on in a different episode.
That's fine. So this is a guy I talk about all the time. I'm always excited when he does something. I have him now in 3 of my 4 dynasty leagues just because I can't get over this guy, even if he's really not that relevant. But Chris Moore is another guy. He just scored a touchdown this past game. He plays for the Ravens. He has a decent athletic profile. And Mike Wallace is going to be a free agent, as well as Michael Campanaro. Campanaro hasn't meant that much, but he has split targets with Moore this season. Moore is their de facto third receiver. He's had a few touchdowns and a few good games. He's worth a shot just in case he becomes anything, especially as the Ravens offense tends a little bit younger. And then for running backs, so there's actually not much there. I'm not going to lie to you guys, but 2 guys that I had my eye on, and I didn't write about running backs in my article. So you're hearing this first on the Afterburners pod, is
inside information.
So D'Angelo Henderson of the Broncos was someone that in the preseason looked really good, and everyone was super excited about and said maybe he'll steal that job from CJA because everyone seems to hate CJA no matter what he does. And Jamal Charles is a free agent, so it's not going to open up a huge opportunity, but it might.
Booker still on that roster too?
He is. I like Booker a good amount, but he's probably not on your waiver wire. So D'Angelo Henderson was one guy I would maybe look at stashing. Another guy, and I know I'm going to get claims of being a homer for this one. I actually never liked this guy, but it's hard to ignore what he's done the past few games, is Wayne Gallman. He started to come on a little bit for the Giants. He's shown some flashes. He's shown to be a little bit of a better receiving back than I thought he was. Personally, I think the Giants are actually going to draft a running back pretty high. Hopefully not with the 2nd overall pick, as fun as it would be to have Saquon on the roster. But
man, you love Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, Saquon.
I don't see it.
Saquon Barkley is my dude.
I don't know.
Speaking of my dude, really quick side story. I'm a big video game guy, and
You are?
there was someone who's playing Ocarina of Time, and they named Link in that game my dude. And it's hilarious because the game always has to like use your name.
Mm.
So there's the Deku tree being like, I knew one day you would journey, my dude. And just stuff like that. If you haven't seen that tweet, check it out. But back to football. So some tight ends. This is a pretty common one. This was mentioned at the comments section of my article. Nick Vannett, I might not be pronouncing that right, but he's on Seattle. He's been earning more snaps. And Jimmy Graham is a free agent, and he's going to be 31, so who knows if Seattle brings him back. And then another Raven. I guess I did this for our good friend of ours, S, who definitely does not listen to this podcast, but I'll give
He
him
wants to come on, apparently.
All right, well, we'll
I
have
told him
him.
he's got to listen first.
Yeah, we'll have him on if he proves that he listens to this.
We're not going to give his Twitter handle either, just because of the fact he's not listening.
Yeah, Max Williams. So Max Williams is a tight end that I liked in the offseason. I wrote about him. Very athletic. He had some knee injuries and knee problems, but he was a second, or was he a second? He might have been a 3rd rounder. He was either a 2nd or 3rd rounder. I can't quite recall. And Ben Watson, who's been the primary tight end for the Ravens this year, is a free agent, and the Ravens are another team like the Giants that target their tight end a lot, at least historically. So that's one to look out for. I'm not going to go into quarterbacks because really the only two notable quarterback changes besides the Vikings, and I have no idea who would even be left on the roster because literally every single one of their quarterbacks could be a free agent at the end of the season, would be if Kirk Cousins leaves, Colt McCoy might get a chance, and if it's a free stash, it's not the worst you could do. And then if Drew Brees leaves the Saints, their backup is Chase Daniels, but I cannot recommend Chase Daniels to any of you in good conscience.
It's a shame too. I always thought when he was coming out of Mizzou, him and I forget who else was playing on that. Who was the backup there and who was the starter from mixing them two up, but they had the two Chase. The other guy, they were both named Chase. I really thought that there's both of them could be really good starting NFL quarterbacks, and they just kind of one's out of the league, and now Chase Daniels kind of
career backup.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's a great list, guys. He wrote an article. It's over on a Deal of Football, right?
Yep, dynastyleaguefootball.com.
At Deal of Football, check it out. Bob's got some great stuff on there, and we've got a few more minutes for a question that was asked on Twitter that we're gonna. This is from @_Pete Law. He posed a question to us, Bobby. So I'm gonna, as usual, hand it off to you. Which 2016 NFL draft class wide receiver should we expect to see a breakout in 2018? So this would be the year 3 wide receivers.
Yeah, and one quick note on Pete. Pete and I have talked a lot. He was recovering, and Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe it was from a back injury. If not, you can definitely feel free to call me an idiot. But we had been talking a lot during his recovery. We've been involved in a lot of smart fantasy football conversations. If you don't already follow him, I would follow him. I also talk comic books with him all the time, so it's not just football, but he knows about a lot of different things that people are interested in, and just a generally great guy to talk to. But this was the thing I was most interested to talk about tonight, and I told Pete that. I was feeling, don't get me wrong, I like doing this show, but it's really hard to come up with topics at this point of the year. And so I was struggling, and then this made me much more excited to record this podcast because it was something that I hadn't really thought about. But without further ado, so in 2016, Will Fuller was one of the wide receivers who came out of that class. And as we saw this year, he really started to connect with Watson, especially on those deep touchdowns. And Watson got hurt, and Fuller has been unusable since. I think that Watson comes back healthy next year. We're really going to see that connection blossom. And Fuller's going to have a true breakout year to the point where people are really going to be talking about him as a dynasty asset, even with Hopkins there.
A couple of the wide receivers that came out of that class. You had your boy you just talked about, Leonto Carew.
Yep.
Tyler Boyd, Booker, but he kind of runs – he's more of a running back, right, in Denver.
Tyler Boyd?
No, Devontae Booker.
Oh, Booker's a running back. Yeah, he's not a wide receiver.
CJ Prosise is also a running back. We had Kenneth Dixon, Laquan Treadwell, Sterling Shepard.
Yep. So I have some others too.
Josh Doxson, Corey Coleman.
So on the note of Sterling Shepard, he's been really good despite people thinking he wasn't going to be this year. He was good as a rookie. He scored a bunch of touchdowns, and this year he's seeing almost as much volume, and people were saying, oh, Brandon Marshall and Evan Ingram are around, and he's not going to do anything. And obviously Marshall's gone from the team, and Ingram's balling, but Shepard's still doing his thing. The thing with the Giants that you have to think about is if they have a new quarterback, as sad as that is for us Giants fans because we're so used to Eli being our quarterback, it could actually be an improvement, meaning that all the skills players could theoretically actually see a bump in their production as a result of Eli not playing anymore, because as much as I hate to admit it,
he's an average quarterback.
Well, not even. Since the Super Bowl run, he's been a below average quarterback. Mm-hmm. So, it's one of those things where we love Eli, but it's entirely possible that even if we just got league average play from a new quarterback, that could give a bump to Odell and Ingram and Shepard and any of the other pass catchers on the Giants.
I think Corey Coleman's an interesting one, too. And we're kind of going to wrap this up a little bit. I think Corey Coleman's an interesting one, too. And if this was about 3 weeks ago and Pete had asked us this, I would have been like, oh, yeah, Corey Coleman, he's going to be huge. But the fact that Josh Gordon's like looking like Josh Gordon, for the most part, if they just have like a more explosive wide receiver, a more explosive passing game where they actually have a focus and they're actually in games, Corey Coleman could still be kind of have a good year, but there's no way he's going to be that wide receiver one.
Yeah, and I had that noted. I actually said I like Corey Coleman, but Josh Gordon plus who knows what QB they have next year.
They'll draft one for your first pick again.
Yeah, maybe they'll take Darno or Rosen, probably.
Allen, any of them. Who knows?
Another one I wanted to talk about very quickly is just Josh Doxson. He has 2 touchdowns over his last 3 games, and he's starting to see some volume. He's not quite getting the yards I'd like him to get, but he is someone that I could see emerging. I do think that it depends on Kirk Cousins staying there.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Because if he's not, I have no idea who would be the quarterback, and that's a problem for them. But I do like Josh Doxson, and if you can get him kind of cheap, I think that's a good thing.
Washington fans, they don't know who they want. They say they got to trade Kirk Cousins, go get somebody like Tom Brady. It's like, okay, well, who's that? And no one has an answer. Like, yeah, because you can't get Tom Brady for Kirk Cousins. You can't get Tom Brady. You can't get Drew Brees.
I guess it'd be bomb trading.
Like, what do you guys want? You don't know what you want. This was fun, Pete. Thanks so much for your question. Again, that's @_Pete Law. Throwing out some good advice out there. I think is he on like some type of what's he on player? He does. I know he does. He works for a website.
He works for a few websites, I think.
Player profile or something something like that. So again, thank you. So we're gonna get that info for you shortly. But thanks again for your question, Pete. And
so Pete writes for Numberfire, playerprofiler.com. Playerprofiler.com is a very interesting site. Numberfire is obviously a great site. He also works with DFF, and a lot of the people who listen to this podcast and who I interact with regularly work with DFF, which is another great site. So definitely check out those sites and give Pete a follow. I didn't even notice until just now, but he's nearing that 1,000 follower mark, which I know means a lot to people who are generally either giving out free fantasy advice or very cheap fantasy advice. So give him a follow, get him over to 1,000. He's a great guy.
Follow him and then say, and then tweet, thank you to the Afterburners for making me follow @Pete_Law.
Yeah, he'll probably get like 2 followers from that, if that. But there you go, Pete.
Well, we'll get Mike to do it. I'll do it. And that's 2 right there.
Yeah, there you go. You already got 2 new followers, Pete.
All right, man. This was fun, guys. Thanks so much for listening. But we got one more. Actually, I forgot. We got one more segment that we always do. We got our Afterburns of the week, Bobby. You got some burns?
I don't know.
I have one lined up. So I have one.
So think about it.
I came in here. Okay, this is we're filming this on Wednesday. This will air on Thursday. Came in here with the intention of last night saying, you know what, I'm gonna have to burn Alabama for voting in a sexual predator. But you know what, the good people of Alabama barely spoke, so I'm not gonna burn Alabama. Instead, I'm gonna burn the commissioner of our fantasy football league, one of your co-writers over at DL Football, Zach Wilkins.
Lopsided trades.
Of course, you got to give me the @ this jabroni went way out of bounds and is saying that Josh Gordon is better than Antonio Brown. Well, Zach, I'm going to make sure that the entire Twitter world understands that you're a jabroni. I'm not coming for you. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but sometime in the future, you're going to get yours, buddy. And you're my burn of the week.
I really don't. I only have one, and I don't even want to say it.
Mike was going to burn me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the easy one would be I'm going to burn Mike. He said that he's sick. He's not sick. I don't know where Sam got that information
from. I was
from.
trying to cover for him, man. Mike is grocery shopping.
Mike is grocery shopping instead of doing this podcast with us. Like, I know it's a necessity of life, but come on, man. Really? Instead of being here talking football, you want to be grocery shopping? Or you couldn't have gone grocery shopping any other time? So
shit, he could have picked up his phone and done the entire podcast in the grocery store.
That's true. That would have been great. Everybody could have heard you just swearing up a storm. But I did have another one. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. If people want to know what my other one is, they can follow me and DM me. Maybe I'll talk about it. It's I think people, I know you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Mike probably, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to say it. So if you're going to call other people overly sensitive or go to the classic age-old, I just made an ass of myself and I'm going to defend it by saying it was just a joke, and then go on this whole rant about people being overly sensitive and from a different generation, maybe don't then go, I'm taking my ball and going home, aka leave the chat or conversation that you were involved in. It's always the people that call other people oversensitive that are themselves oversensitive. And that is my burn of the week. It's sure to stir the pot a bit if particular people listen, but that's it.
All right, there's the burn of the week, guys. We're running out of time. Thanks so much for listening to. We had a great season. Still not sure if we're going to come up with an episode next week, but we're definitely going to come up with some more episodes as the playoffs go on, as we get closer to draft times like that. Two quick things I want to hit on, two very realistic things. One, I'm sure if you haven't heard, we had the attack at New York Port Authority. Everyone in New York, we're very, very lucky to be safe, and so definitely be safe out there as we enter the holiday season. Second thing, if you don't know about net neutrality, please look at it. Otherwise, you're going to be paying for things like YouTube, Twitter. No one wants to do that. We got to keep the internet free. We have to be able to make sure that we can have our voices heard. Something very important to Bobby and I, that we give out free information, free content. More so for Bobby because he's got a lot more followers and he's so much smarter. Me, I'd be all right. But anyways, thanks so much for listening. Again, you can find us at Afterburners Pod, at The Needy One, at Wrecked Fantasy, and then Mike, who's usually with us, at Mike Jarvis. Take care. If we don't see you, happy holidays, happy New Year. Be safe. Like I said, we love you, and we'll promise we'll be active and answer some more questions we have for you out there on social media. But until then, see you later.